Okay, let's dive into this. Today, in this explainer, we're taking a look at a truly mind-bending concept, the Aetheric Causal Set, or ACS, and something known as the Jim Whitney Effect. We're tackling an idea that fundamentally challenges the very architecture of reality. If you've ever sat back and wondered what the universe actually looks like at the most microscopic, foundational level, well, you are in the exact right place.
To really wrap our heads around this, I need you to do something for me. Completely toss out the traditional idea of smooth, continuous space. You know, the unbroken space we seem to experience when we walk across a room. Instead, imagine reality is made up of a vast collection of discrete individual events, kind of like microscopic stepping stones. Event A happens, which causes event B. But here is the massive question we're exploring today. What if there's a hidden wiring connecting all of this? What if there is literally an invisible quantum ether linking the entire fabric of cause and effect?
And that brings us right to the ACS, the Aetheric Causal Set. Think of this as a model of the universe built from exactly 5,000 discrete events. And they aren't just randomly floating around, they are hardwired together by that hidden aether we just talked about. Mathematically, this wiring is governed by a massive 5,000 by 5,000 quantum matrix. We call it the Hamiltonian, or just matrix H for short. Basically, every row in this matrix dictates how strongly one event talks to another. Our mission for what we called phase 2 of this research was actually pretty straightforward. Test matrix H. We locked ourselves in, ran these tests back-to-back on a local RTX 4090 using pure old-school DOS scripts. We had to know, does this matrix produce true complex quantum mechanics where actual physics emerges? Or does it just give us boring, ordinary classical diffusion that either traps energy or leaks it out?
Right, so that brings us to phase 2A, the quantum explosion. To test the wiring through unitary time evolution, we took literally 100% of our quantum amplitude, the entire quantum state, and dropped it onto a single isolated node in the network. Then we just let it evolve using the Schrödinger equation. We wanted to see exactly how it would spread through the ACS. Would it get stuck? Would it break the whole system? Let's move to and see how this builds over time. We track this using something called the participation ratio, or PR, which basically just measures how many nodes the quantum amplitude is touching. At t equals 0.0 seconds, our PR is exactly 1. It is perfectly localized on that starting node. But watch what happens in a literal fraction of a second. By t equals 0.4 seconds, the PR just explodes to roughly 2,400 nodes. It's already covering almost half of the entire 5,000 node graph. And by t equals 2.0 seconds, it hits its maximum spread, a PR of 2,490.8. The amplitude exploded ballistically and stayed perfectly spread out.
I absolutely have to emphasize this final PR number, 2,490.8. This is not just some random piece of data. This number is our absolute proof that matrix H is perfectly healthy and mathematically unitary. When we looked at the survival rate, meaning the amount of amplitude left stranded on the original node, it was a microscopic 0.00118. The norm error was virtually non-existent. We're talking down to 10 to the negative 14th power. The system didn't blow up, the amplitude didn't get trapped. Matrix H absolutely crushed the first test.
Okay, so to really grasp the next test, we have to talk about the fundamental difference between quantum and classical mechanics. Think about quantum waves. Quantum amplitude doesn't just travel like a car on a road, it interferes. By 0.04 seconds, our quantum wave was literally sitting in multiple places at the exact same time. On the flip side, imagine classical ants. A classical ant can only walk down one single wire at a time. No quantum phases, no being in two places at once, just a very long, very boring commute. For our next step, we unleashed 2,000 of these classical ants into the exact same matrix H wiring, just to see if they could mimic the quantum distribution.
Which leads us to phase 2B, the classical collapse. I've got to shift the tone a bit here because the results of this test, using something known as the Whitney particle filter, were dramatically different. We set up a sequential Monte Carlo filter to see if 2,000 classical walkers could somehow shadow the true quantum density. Essentially, could simple classical coin flip walks fake quantum mechanics? And what happened next was an absolute, undeniable catastrophe for the classical ants.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the effective sample size, or ESS. At t equals 0.00 seconds, the ESS is a perfect 2,000. All the walkers are weighted equally, perfectly matching the starting line. But look at what happens at t equals 0.04 seconds. The ESS violently collapses to just 3.38.
because the quantum wave had already bolted, spreading instantly to multiple nodes through interference. The classical ants were basically left in the dust at the starting line. Literally, 1,997 of our 2,000 classical walkers received a weight of 0 and died instantly. And the total variation distance stayed incredibly high, proving the ants were nowhere near the true quantum state.
We didn't just give up on them, though. We aggressively resampled the system, essentially cloning the 3 surviving ants to keep the simulation alive and give them a chance to keep spreading. By the end of the night, we had 2,000 ants alive again. But they drifted into completely the wrong places. The true quantum PR was nearly 2,490, but the particle PR got stuck way down around 637. A staggering 72% of those classical ants ended up standing in completely the wrong neighborhoods. It's like a tourist wandering totally lost without a GPS. They completely failed to track the true quantum state.
But, and here is the massive plot twist, this brings us to the successful failure. This absolute horrific collapse of the classical model, it is actually the greatest scientific victory for the ACS theory. Think about it. If those classical ants had been able to just easily copy the quantum wave, it would mean the Aetheric Causal Set is incredibly boring. It would mean this so-called hidden wiring is just classical randomness wearing a quantum math costume. It would mean no new physics.
And that is exactly what brings us to the defining concept here, the Jim Whitney Effect. Because the classical ants utterly, miserably failed to copy the quantum wave, we definitively prove that matrix H is doing real, undeniable quantum work. As the quote perfectly captures, it is the line that says quantum on this side, classical on that side. The classical model couldn't fake it, even when we bent over backwards resampling it, because quantum amplitude doesn't just walk step by step, it interferes, it transports ballistically. We absolutely needed that line drawn in the sand, and we got it.
So the crucial point is this. Classical diffusion spreads slowly. It moves proportionally to the square root of time. But our quantum participation ratio spreads ballistically, scaling directly with time. When classical proposals try to navigate this exact same ether wiring, they end up 72% wrong. All of this serves as hard, mathematical proof that matrix H isn't just basic connectivity. It's producing genuine quantum interference that a classical system literally cannot fake. The Whitney collapse is the exact signature a candidate quantum gravity theory needs to prove it has actually left the classical regime.
Which brings us to phase 2 being locked, and the big question of what's next. As of July 25, 2026, this phase is officially locked down as a single source of truth. All these numbers come straight from the JSON reports. No open reruns, no unresolved discrepancies. And the entire data package is completely forkable, meaning any collaborator can take the matrix H file and the lock files, keep pushing the research forward, and merge it back. But now that the quantum nature of the ether is proven, we really have to pivot and look toward the future.
And that future is option C on the roadmap. Now that we know for a fact that quantum amplitude spreads ballistically through this hidden wiring, the next huge hurdle is how do we actually build a spatial ruler to measure it? We need to construct a Laplacian operator, a position operator to measure exactly how that amplitude spreads, not just the fact that it does. If the universe truly is built on 5,000 discrete events connected by an invisible quantum ether, how do we measure the shape of reality itself? It is a pretty staggering thought to leave you with today.